Because most often you do these trials and you get no result, you get negative result. So it's good to see a trial where it's positive result. And we have to see where it goes from here. And your work's going okay?
All is well, thank you.
Okay, good. No plans to travel to Australia?
No,
No?
I've kind of cut down on travel quite a bit because I do a lot of we are now in many places outside Chennai, so I travel
Okay.
in India.
So nationally,
Yeah,
quite a bit. Yeah.
so I've
And
kind
you
of
still arranging those international meetings, or
it's been a while. It's been a
it's been
while.
a while? Okay.
I think
Yeah.
the last one we did was 2022.
Okay.
So
I
we
think COVID probably changed things a bit.
changed things quite a bit. So I think most things have gone webinar mode.
Yeah.
This I'm something that I agree to do with ASAD every quarter. But of course,
Okay.
so the last one was with Serge Gautier.
Okay.
And we've had a bit of a drought after that for various reasons. It just didn't get going. But now I think we are hopefully back in the business and we will have a webinar every quarter.
Yeah. Now, fortunately, I couldn't make plans to travel to South Korea for
You
this
will be making
speaking.
it this year. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, although it's a shame, but would have been nice if I could go. But I'll still see if I can. But doesn't look like.
I understand they've got quite a nice program for the forthcoming ASAD. Chris was telling
Yeah.
they've zeroed in on a good program.
Are you going?
I'm not going to, unfortunately. No.
No.
This
Okay.
time I'll be missing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just check. Suraya, we have you here with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh yeah, good, great. Hi, and nice to see you.
Thank you.
You're sounding very faint, Suraya.
Is it?
Yeah, I can hardly hear her.
Suraya, can you just check your are you trying to use a headset or something? Because you're sounding very faint.
Okay. It's better for me to take it off, right? Well,
Yeah, that's much better.
okay. Right. Yep, because I was using the headset.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So it's unfortunate that you are not going to Korea this year.
Yes. Are you going to be there?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful.
Yeah, right. Because I'm giving a talk there as well. Yeah. I'm talking on Greek there.
Right. I know you organize such a wonderful conference, so it's going to be hard for everyone to keep up.
I think Korea will do much better than us. Okay.
I think
But
you guys did a wonderful job. So you
yeah.
set a really high bar actually for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, but
And otherwise.
at least I got the neurologist involved this time. Right? So I think I put a few interests in dementia now, so the neurologists are much more involved, right?
Wonderful.
Which I'm quite happy in that.
It's locally helping get more people involved in the work that you do.
Yes, right. Because I can't be here forever. I mean, Chris, we grow old together.
Yes.
So there'll be when we have to leave, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There needs to be another gen of people getting involved.
Yeah.
Surya, we can't see you. Do you want to just test your camera if you don't mind?
Yeah. Okay. I'm on.
There you are.
Yes, there you are.
Am I to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see you now. Yeah, you have
Okay.
a window behind you, so the light is behind you rather than in front of you. But
So I think I better switch on my light.
Yeah.
It might help.
yeah,
Oh yeah, that's lightens up the place. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
better. That's better.
Right.
Definitely better. Yeah.
So we are a
All
minute
right.
from starting.
We're
Lovely
going to
to see
start.
you, Suraj.
Yeah, just about a minute to go. So yeah, we'll start
Yeah,
on.
start
We've
soon.
already got people joining us. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you start now.
Yeah, I'm going. So I'm just sort of clocking into exactly the time. Yes. So
Okay.
good day and welcome to this Asian Society Against Dementia's webinar, which is meant to be a quarterly event. We do apologize for a bit of a hiatus from the last one. Those of you who were there will remember that we had Professor Serge Gautier talk to us about the new molecules and both the excitement and not so exciting things about them. It's wonderful this time to have Professor Parminder Sachdev, and also to take us through this webinar, we have Dr. Suraya Yusuf, who from Malaysia, who organized such a wonderful conference for ASAD in Penang in 2024. Just to say that the next ASAD conference is not very far away. The Asian Society Against Dementia meets across Asia every year. And our next meeting is in Korea. And we really hope that many of you are going to make it to that meeting. So, please take this as a formal invitation to join ASAD in Korea. And without further ado, let me ask Dr. Surya to take over his chair, introduce the speaker, and we're very, very fortunate to have Parminder Sachdev here today talking about exciting results from a new trial. Professor Surya Yusuf.
Okay, thank you, Professor Krishnamurthy. First, I would like to welcome all the participants to the ASAD webinar. As Chris says, it's a regular thing which we hope to do once, 4 times a year actually, right? So we hope to reach the target this year, right? So I will repeat what Prof. Krishnamurthy says. It gives me great pleasure actually to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's session, Scientia Professor Parminder Sachdev from Australia. Right. We were also fortunate that Prof. Sachdev actually graced our ASAD 2024 in Penang. So I think some of you have met him, right? Are familiar with him. Okay, Professor Sachdev is a professor of neuropsychiatry at the University of New South Wales in Australia, as well as the clinical director of the Neuropsychiatric Institute at the Prince of Wales Hospital in Sydney. And he is also the co-director for the Centre for Healthy Brain Aging, CHIBA, UNSW. His early years actually work were much more related to drug-induced movement disorders, in particular akathisia and tardive dyskinesia, as well as neuroleptic malignant syndrome. He also has extensively examined the outcome of psychosurgery and examined the various brain stimulation techniques, such as TMS, VNS, DBS for psychiatric disorders. He has many other achievements, but I think it's fortunate for us that his attention has shifted towards dementia and pre-dementia syndromes, particularly relating to neuroimaging, neuropsychology, biomarkers, and risk factors. In 2012, he co-founded CHIBA, which promotes brain health and prevention of dementia. He has led, and I think these studies are ongoing, 3 longitudinal cognitive aging studies, the Sydney Memory and Aging Study, Older Australian Twin Study, and the Sydney Centenarian Study, and at the same time, also leads in 3 international networks, which is COSMIC, SPROCOG, and ICC Dementia. He has published countless books, chapters, and peer-reviewed papers, and has been honored with awards, too many to mention here. But on a lighter note, looking at his book titles, I think Prof. Sachdev must have led such an interesting life. I think I would love to get my hands on them, particularly about the Yipping Tiger, such fantastic title, I thought. And Other Days from Neuropsychiatric Clinic and Secondary Schizophrenia. He also is a poet and has published a book of poems. Yeah, okay, you got that. Okay, so before we start, I would like to remind the participants to please write your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the page. We will try to go through as many as we can. Okay, so okay, I think I have to stop my yapping now. So let us welcome Professor Satdev to present to us the results of his landmark study. And I think it's still hot in the press now, right? So Mind Your Brain, Verifiable Risk Factors for Dementia, Lessons Learned from a Large Randomized Controlled Trial. Okay, Professor Satdev, the mic is yours now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suraya. That was very kind, really, and undeserved, I think. And thank you, Krishnamurti, for helping organize this. It's really a great pleasure to be associated with ASAD. And I enjoyed the meeting last year, and I unfortunately can't make it to this year's meeting, but hopefully next year in the Philippines, I think I probably will try to be there. So let me begin by sharing my slides. Just bear with me for a moment. And just hoping that you can see my slides.
Still sharing.
Essentially, I'm
Yeah.
presenting the data from the Maintain Your Brain trial, which is actually a trial that was led by our center. Professor Henry Barati, who's my colleague here, was the lead author on this trial. And it's taken several years, but fortunately, we were able to publish this earlier this year in Nature Medicine, and I will give you the link for this so that you can look at the article in greater detail. But before I actually describe this trial, let me just take you through some concepts, really. I think one thing we want to do is we want to rid the world of dementia. That's a tall aim. But how does one do that? One way, of course, is to look at disease elimination. And we have examples, say something like smallpox. But with dementia, because firstly, you're not talking one disease, but several diseases. And even if you hone in on one disease, say Alzheimer's disease, we thought maybe we could develop a vaccine, and there were trials of vaccines for Alzheimer's disease. They didn't go very far, but people are chipping away at it. And I think what may be a more sort of achievable goal would be to perhaps delay the onset of dementia. Now we know that the prevalence of dementia doubles every 5 years after the age of 65. So if you can push back the onset of dementia and expecting that perhaps life expectancy is not changing with that, you can lower the number of people living with dementia significantly. So if you delay it by 2 years, could arguably lower the prevalence by 20% or more. So that perhaps is an achievable goal. But what do we need to do for that? We have to look at some population-based interventions, and we need to look at what can be modified in relation to the risk for dementia. So some strategies we already know are happening currently. We're looking at strategies to moderate alcohol use. And here I'm talking about all-cause dementia. I'm not focusing on Alzheimer's disease per se. And that most of the studies actually, prevention studies have really looked at all-cause dementia. So moderating alcohol use is something we can do. In communities, we can do much more than we currently have. Looking at head injury and prevention of head injury, not only in life, in road traffic accidents, etc., but also in sports-related brain trauma. Prevention of certain infections, for example, HIV, which was previously a big threat, but now seems to be reasonably under control in most parts of the world. Prevention of stroke and early intervention for stroke. I think these are really areas where we have current evidence. We can intervene at a population-based level. In many countries, this has already been done. Now, what about other risk factors? So you just look at general risk factors for dementia. We know that there are some risk factors that are not modifiable, but there is a large number of risk factors that are modifiable. We have the brain reserve factors that such as low education, lack of complex mental activity, low physical activity, poor social network. So mental activity, physical activity, and social activity, the three keys in terms of brain reserve. Then there are the vascular risk factors. We know they affect risk of vascular dementia, but also to some extent contribute to other dementias. And in fact, of course, also the mixed dementias, which are the most common in the older people. Then there are nutritional factors. Certain diets, we have some evidence that diets may be relevant. There are some certain other aspects that perhaps we do not have enough information about. But here, of course, alcohol comes into play as well, and something we can work on. And then there are a number of other factors that are being added on, such as hearing loss, visual loss, depression, pollution, environmental factors, both in the built and natural environment. And as you perhaps all know, that there was this very well-quoted Lancet Commission report earlier, which they had a second report, updated report in 2024. And this figure is from that, essentially looking at 14 potentially modifiable risk factors. And here, what the numbers that you see are actually the population attributable fractions of these risk factors. And you can see that these risk factors operate through the lifespan. So essentially, you have to look at healthy aging, starting from childhood in terms of prevention of dementia. So that's one lesson we learn from looking at these risk factors. But then there are other risk factors that we could possibly modify. And for this trial, we picked 4 particular risk factors that we try to address from these. And of course, there are many other risk factors that we possibly can also address, both at individual as well as population-based level. So we are not the first ones to do it. There have been several trials. So if you actually look at this review published in 2022, there were 112 completed trials of prevention, arguably prevention of dementia, but often it is more delay of cognitive decline, really, because very often these trials do not go on to the extent, to the duration that we need to actually look at enough incident dementia cases to have enough power. So often, because the funding cycle is short and researchers want some outcome after 3 to 5 years, at least. So often they look at cognitive decline rather than dementia as an outcome variable. And as you can see here, many of these trials have been single domain trials, but they've also been multi-domain trials where many different risk factors are addressed at the same time. And there are several ongoing trials which are still currently in place, and we'll come to that in a moment. But one of the more famous trials, multi-domain trials, was this Finnish trial, often referred to as the FINGER trial. Most of you have heard of this trial. So essentially what they did is they had it's a double-blind RCT where they had 1,260 participants. They brought in to a center, they were assessed, and then there was intervention in relation to diet, exercise, cognitive training, and also vascular risk monitoring. They were given exercises to do at home, both cognitive exercises and physical exercise, as well as, of course, nutrition. And they found that at the end of 2 years, this is data up to 2 years, the groups had separated. The intervention group was showing greater benefit in terms of, if you look at their total cognitive score as a composite score, there was a significant difference at 2 years between the two. And this was seen in these 3 domains that were looked at as well. So overall, cognitive function, global cognitive function was 25% higher in the intervention group. Now, this paper was published in 2015. As you know, that was 10 years ago. So these people are still being followed, although we haven't seen the dementia results as yet from them. So you can see how long it takes to see whether it really did shift the curve in relation to dementia incidence. But they published in 2022 showing that the cerebrovascular risk or stroke risk was lower in the intervention group as opposed to control group. So that looks promising as well. Now, there have been other multi-component intervention trials, and I've listed some of the prominent ones here. And unfortunately, only the finger trial was positive. That clears the difference between the control arm and the intervention arm. There were these other trials, the MAPT trial, pre-DIVA trial, which was largely vascular, HETIS trial, which actually was an internet counseling trial of the elderly. None of these, and these other DU Health, Look Ahead trial, none of these trials actually showed a significant difference in cognitive outcomes. But they did demonstrate that dementia risk, looking at a risk score, often they use various risk scores such as the KD risk score or the ANU risk ADR index, that the dementia risk, they were able to reduce the risk, but actually the primary outcome was not positive in these trials. But the finger trial has been very popular, and what has led to a kind of an industry. In fact, almost every country wants to do something like that. Really. And as you can see, that they developed this collaboration called the Worldwide Fingers, and you see the dark blue are the countries where trials are ongoing. Of course, Australia, as you can see here, our trial, the Maintain Your Brain trial. Of course, there is another trial, which is an in-person trial called the Arrow trial. You can see other in Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Japan, South Korea, China also. There are trials happening and others are being planned. So Asia is not far behind in these. Now, the other side to the story is that if you actually go on to the web and look for any apps, and you'll find all sorts of apps. This is 10 years ago. Publication. Someone did a review of, looked at the web and tried to see how many apps there were for various things. You can see there were literally hundreds and thousands, perhaps thousands of apps of various things. That number definitely must have multiplied by now. Really, I didn't have the sort of the gumption to go in and try to, but you can see that but usually these are single domain, single strategy kind of apps, and there are a number of limitations for this. So what did we want to do with the Maintain Your Brain trial? There were a number of aims. So starting with, firstly, we started off developing a platform, an e-health platform that could deliver multimodal, customized, and sequential dementia risk reduction and lifestyle modification intervention. So we wanted to do a trial which is delivered online completely, so as to reach the larger population. That was the thing. We felt that having in-person interventions was very expensive and often not affordable, and perhaps can we deliver this online? So that was really the major goal. We wanted to see in the medium term whether we could shift the curve in terms of cognitive decline in this population of 55 to 75. And the longer term, of course, could we delay the onset of dementia? And perhaps we could use linkage data. We didn't necessarily have to follow these people up for 10, 15 years. We could use linkage, administrative linkage data to see who was developing dementia and who wasn't. And then look at the cost effectiveness of this program. Essentially saying, okay, if you can show that this can be done, we could probably have something which can be rolled out at a national level. So the primary hypothesis, of course, was that over 3 years of active intervention, participants engaging in this e-health platform will have less cognitive decline and less all-cause dementia than a passive control group, really. When I say passive, I'll actually talk to you about, because it's an information control group. We still provide them in health information. Then there were some secondary hypotheses that the outcome would be intervention dose related, that the risk factor profile of the intervention group will reduce significantly, so their dementia risk will go down. And that decrease in risk also will relate to cognitive outcomes. So what the primary outcome measure, of course, was the global cognitive function. We're using online testing, neuropsychological tests, which were a combination of this Cogstate, which is a well-known neuropsychological test based on cards, playing cards, and the Cambridge Brain Sciences tests, which this company is now called Creos, changed their name. But so it is a combination of these, and these are the cognitive domains assessed: processing speed, attention, visual learning, list learning, and working memory. And we had a composite index from these, and that was the primary outcome. And of course, we were looking at the separate domains as well. And these tests were administered at baseline and annually over the course of the trial for 3 years. So we recruited people from this 45 and up study. The 45 and up study is actually a population-based large study in New South Wales, which is the largest most populous state in Australia. And there are nearly a little over 250,000 people in this recruited in 2008, and they've been surveyed repeatedly over this period. And we saw that they were, in a way, that these are people who already were participating in a survey. They were more likely to come forward for this trial. And what we needed, of course, was that not only did these people be responsive, they had to have at least 2 risk factors. Of the 4 modules that we were addressing in this trial, they at least should have risk factors on 2 of those to be eligible for the trial. They have to, of course, have a computer at home and be connected to the internet, and they should be able. They should accept randomization for this. So essentially, when we initially did our power calculations, we needed nearly 8,000 per group over this period to actually show dementia incidence. So essentially, we certainly couldn't achieve that number. So we ended up with a smaller number, and our outcome was cognitive decline rather than dementia as a primary outcome. Of course, they were excluded if they had dementia at baseline, or they had other significant neurological disorder, they had visual impairment, serious psychiatric disorder, severe physical illness. It was all done in English. And if they were very active originally and doing other things, really, then they also were not suitable for this. So we recruited, we actually approached, we wrote to nearly 99,000 or nearly 100,000 people. We got 14,000 responses of interest. And when we actually looked at them, we then asked about 12,000 to actually fill in the risk factor profiles. So they had to do a screen for risk factor profile and then ended up with little over 6,000 into the trial. So about 3,050 in each group. And the intervention group had intervention over there were 4 modules. I'll come to how the trial actually occurred, but intervention group had tailored intervention, tailored to their risk factors, and it was coaching and individualization of the intervention, but done all online. There was no face-to-face contact with these people. But with the controls, there were regular newsletters, emails, and we gave them health information, current health information, but nothing more than that. So it was no active coaching was done. So these were the 4 basic modules: physical activity, diet and nutrition, cognitive training, and depression and management of stress. So this is how the whole thing actually panned out, that we developed this platform. This was done by our colleagues at the Western Sydney University with Dr. Anupama Ginniche as the primary lead person. Then we did some validation of our cognitive testing as well as physical nutrition, physical activity and nutrition modules. And then we did a pilot to look at adherence and recruitment procedures. And then we have finalized the protocols and we rolled out the trial. We actually invited participants, assessed them, looked at how many risk factors they had, how many modules each one would be eligible for, and then randomized them into intervention and control. You can see the numbers here, and then followed them. We assessed them at baseline. We did two cognitive assessments. The first one was discarded because of we wanted to reduce the practice effect of these assessments. So the first one was a trial or a learning kind of a assessment. The second one was taken as the baseline assessment. So you get consent also done online, screening, baseline assessment, then modules people could be eligible for 1, 2, or 3, or 2, 3, 4, or 4 modules. So minimum was 2 modules. It could be 3 or 4 modules. Each module went for 10 weeks. And if someone was doing 4 modules, they had 2-week breaks in between, and then so they had the whole year when they were doing modules. And after a module was finished, there was booster done every month thereafter for the next throughout the trial. The people who did not have the intervention were sent this information, and then every 3 months that information was updated in the control group. The platform was fully online interoperable clinical management system, and it could support multiple interventions, was flexible interoperable options. Study participants could engage in online activities via web-based interfaces throughout the trial. It had the ability to algorithmically personalize trial activities based on the needs of the participant, and able to handle large volumes of data over a long period of time. So I'll just give you an idea of the modules very briefly. This is nutrition module, largely based on the principles of the Mediterranean diet. Of course, you could be eating any kind of diet, but the principles of this diet were used. And people were told how far away they were from these principles and what they had to do, what they had to increase, what they had to decrease. And there were suggestions offered in terms of menus, in terms of meals. There were a recipe library was created and was regularly updated. It took over a year for Professor Mirvia Pieteroni Singh from the University of Sydney and her colleagues to actually develop this module. So we were really delighted with how well this went, kind of resources that were built for this. And Professor Pieteroni Singh also led the physical activities module. And here there were 3 types of physical activities. There was aerobic exercise, there was strength training and balance training. And there was expectation that you'd be doing strength training at least twice a week. And there were aerobic exercise every day and balance training, depending on their needs. And again, a baseline assessment was done. And the recommendation was individualized to the person's needs. And this was this was monitored because they had logbooks throughout this period. And for the nutrition streams, you can see that there were various streams. The main stream was low adherence to this Mediterranean diet, but there were also people who we thought were undernourished or so-called malnourished. And then there was this alcohol issue that some people had, which was addressed separately as well. And brain training, we actually partnered with a company from Germany called NeuroNation. NeuroNation actually is approved by the German government to actually, the German government actually pays for people to actually go on to NeuroNation's programs. They have 30 million users, I understand, in Germany. So it's really very well accepted brain training program. And but again, here it was designed in a way that it could be tailored to the needs of the individual. And there was an expectation of 30 sessions over the 10 weeks, so 3 sessions per week that these people were doing, at least for half an hour. And feedback was given, performance graphs were summarized. And based on their initial performance on various cognitive domains, the tasks were chosen. And they were easy, medium, and difficult exercises, and they were kind of sandwiched in a way. So the person would do some hard exercise and then they do some easy ones so that they don't get fatigued. And this was varied across. So that I think that was really one of the keys to the success and engagement of this. And the final module was what we call Peace of Mind, which basically is a program which has been running at the University of New South Wales at St. Vincent's Hospital, initially set up by Professor Gavin Andrews. It's called the This Way Up. And I would really encourage you to actually look up thiswayup.org.au because it's an excellent, brilliant program, really. It covers a range of anxiety disorders, also sleep disorders. And we picked the depression anxiety course. There were 6 lessons done over this period. And it combines various cognitive behavioral strategies. Now, this one doesn't offer boosters. But it has been shown previously to be quite effective. And as I said, the control group had this information-based modules. And I also said spoke about boosters previously, so I won't repeat that. So this is what the participants looked like briefly. The median age was about 65 years. There were more women expected, and these were a highly educated group, or higher than average educated group, really, because I think that is the bias in 45 and up study, and we picked that. We exaggerated that bias, I think, in this, also because these people had to have a computer and to be able to log in. And they were largely Caucasian sample, again, biased in that sense. But otherwise, I think that if you look at their profile, risk profile, hypertension, high cholesterol, the two groups were very evenly matched. So I think that's the main point of this slide. And if you actually, we used a risk scale. This is the Australian National University Alzheimer's Disease Risk Index, the short form. And if you look at that, overall, if you look at the median, if you take out age and sex significantly actually affect this risk index. You see that the score is negative, suggesting that they had quite a few protective factors. So you see, looking at a generally healthy population, and I'll come to the significance of that later. And if you look at the number of eligible modules, there, about a third were eligible for 2 modules, half of them for 3, and less for 4 modules. Okay, so this is the outcome of, sorry, I think I've missed one slide, but never mind. So this is, if you look at this figure on the left, this is what happened in terms of their global cognitive composite. That we saw significant improvement in both groups in the first year, and that appeared to be sustained over the 3-year period. And the difference in the effect size between the two was 0.18, suggesting that there was, I mean, if you average it over the 3 years, 0.06, although you can see that the major significant change occurred in the first year, and it was then maintained. Now, of course, see, one always worries about practice effects when you're actually doing repeated neuropsychological tests. So we tried to reduce that by doing firstly 2 baseline assessments and discarding the first one, because often we know that practice effects happens when you do the first repetition greatest, although that it still continues. And then, of course, you look at the control group. And the control group, which was given information only, the one in red here, is also improving, and can probably, if you partial that out, even though we can say that maybe some improvement occurred because we were giving them good information and they thought they were engaged in a trial. So that itself leads to improvement. But even if you take that into account, as well as the practice effects, you can see a big significant difference between the two groups. And we were quite encouraged by this, or that when we actually looked at the FINGER trial, which has had so much publicity, and that was an in-person intervention, much more expensive, much smaller study, about a little over 1,000 people. the effect size over 2 years were 0.04. So that you can see that we achieving a much greater effect size in this trial rather than in the finger trial. Now, of course, there are a number of issues when you do online trials. One is that there is a lot of attrition, and some of that attrition is random. The other is non-random. Really, some people not doing well drop out. So we actually, when you look at the people who completed the primary outcome at 3 years, you find that there were more of the control participants completed than the intervention participants. Of course, people may have done 2, 3 assessments, not all 4 assessments. So when we actually do an analysis, we do intention to treat analysis, and we do mixed models over this period. So, but and when you look at the number of modules that people had tried over this period, how many, what kind of engagement did they have with their modules? We find that about a third of people had attempted more than 60% of the exercises that were recommended. Overall withdrawal rate was low, about 6%. We think that was pretty good, which is much better than most online trials, which get much greater attrition we see after a few months. So this is a 3-year trial. Most online trials are a few weeks only, really. But we tried to do a number of sensitivity analyses. Of course, we did an intention to treat analysis to start off with. We looked at completers only, the 3-year completers, and there was no significant difference in the outcomes. We used multiple imputation for missingness, and of course, to account for non-random missingness. We did a tipping point analysis, and that showed that we actually needed a 0.75 standard deviation lower score in the missing data, people who are missing, for this to be non-significant, which was highly unlikely. So we think that the sensitivity analyses support the conclusion that this was an effective intervention. We saw change in all cognitive domains. You look at complex attention, look at executive function. If you actually look at learning memory, you saw the improvement, and that was sustained. It didn't drop off, unlike the other 2 domains where you did see a drop off. Learning and memory seems to be sustained. And we looked at a number of secondary outcomes. And one of them is, of course, looking at their diet. And this is a measure of the Mediterranean-ness of their diet, the medical. And you can see that the diet quality improved in this group, in the intervention group, and was sustained. Look at K10 as a measure of the psychological distress, because it was lower in the people. We looked at their overall risk factor using this ANU ADRI, and the lower risk was lower in this group as well. All of these were significant at the 0.001 level. Strength training, they had greater improvement in that, and aerobic exercise, they were maintaining that over the 3-year period as well. So even if the cognitive outcome you think is not very significant, this you know that these people are actually exercising more, they're eating better diets, their psychological health is better from this trial. Then, was it cost effective? We looked at the cost. We looked at the program cost, how much, and we thought the intervention group cost is about $1,500, a little over $1,500 per Australian dollars per subject, whereas the control group got a little over 500. But you should accept that this is a research study. We had to build a platform which took over a year and a half itself, and it's hugely expensive. And then, of course, all the data collected, all the research assistants and other staff and all. So the actual running cost, once you have this up and going, should not be so much high, so high per person. But then you looked at the healthcare costs. We actually did linkage analysis to see how are these people utilizing hospitals, utilizing GPs, specialists, and those data are available through in Australia through the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. So what drugs they were using, the medical benefit scheme, because as you know, we have a universal Medicare system. So we could actually log in and see what their usage of health services was. And actually, overall, if you look at the overall usage between the intervention group and control group, there wasn't any difference. And when we actually looked at the, and we thought that there was a reduction. We had their baseline usage prior to intervention. We thought that the trial was actually neutral over these 3 years. It had not cost the taxpayer anything significantly. But we of course are not factoring in any long-term benefit that this will give. If it does lower the rate of dementia, rate of stroke, or leads to better physical health, low falls, low fractures in the future, those kind of outcomes are not factored into this. Overall, even running the trial was cost neutral as far as the taxpayer was concerned. So I conclude here by saying that we have this online lifestyle intervention, which has the capacity to reach this population, 55 to 77 that we had enrolled, at least. There was improvement, movement and cognition, and reduction in risk factors. It is cost neutral. We, of course, think that a longer term outcome will show that it does have significant benefits. And there is public health and potential economic implications of this trial. Now, what does it mean in terms of dementia? So we think that if we translate that into how much would it postpone dementia by, perhaps by a year in terms of dementia onset, it's pushed back. And we can say arguably prevalence could be reduced by 10%. I mean, this is very, very rough figures, really. But the global impact could be quite enormous if this was rolled out population level. Now, we are trying to see if we can get funding now to roll it out to population. We think that perhaps we can target the higher risk population. This is a population that already is better educated, has low risk factors generally, and therefore the gains may not be as good as in a population that really is high risk, maybe disadvantaged, low socioeconomic strata. So that's population we'd like to approach. We like to approach people from other backgrounds, non-English speaking backgrounds. Often they're disadvantaged in many ways in society, in the society generally. We want to see how we can incorporate other aspects. So we didn't really monitor vascular health, but we did provide health information. We didn't really monitor their vascular health. Didn't get them to necessarily go to their GPs, log in their blood pressures, blood sugars, things like that, which could be incorporated in the future. We didn't look at other aspects like smoking that could be incorporated. There are other interventions that social health is another area that we like to go into, which can be now also done through online interventions. So there's a lot of potential for sort of enhancement of the program per se, and modularization so that you can be very individualized in terms of your approach. And of course, in the future, one could possibly use AI to better individualize engagement and module selection as well, so that the costs could be brought down further. We did need people at this end to help individualize a lot of the interventions. And there were queries that were raised by many of the participants which had to be answered by people. And we weren't using AI for this in this trial. So it was, the cost was, a lot of the cost was because of that. And a lot of the cost also because there were a number of computer issues, technical issues that people came up with, which had to be sorted out, especially you can see an older population, not very savvy with computers. We'd also like to make it available on tablets and mobile phones in the future. So those are developments for the future we are looking at. So I think I'll stop here. Just like to acknowledge all the the research team led by Professor Brodati, and of course, Professor Maria Fitroni Singh, who put in a lot of the work for the modules, Michael Valenzuela for the cognitive training, and of course, all our associate investigators, including Nan Bosler, who was a consumer, quite actively involved in advising us on this. Professor Andrews, who's this way up was used. And of course, NHMRC for the funding and the Sachs Institute for the 45 and up study. We had these industry partners, NeuroNation, supplied the cognitive training, Cogstate, Cambridge Brain Sciences, and of course, we use the ANU risk factors index and the Amsterdam functional index for this as well. So, and thank you all for your attention. Before I finish, I'd like to also just draw your attention to the Australian Dementia Forum that's coming up in June in Perth. And you're all most welcome. Just Google this Australian Dementia Research Forum 2025, and you will see how to register. We'd like to welcome you as an Australian-Asian partnership that has been now being promoted for a few years. So thank you once again. I'll stop sharing my screen. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Professor Satdev, for sharing your study on the ASAT platform. I would like to invite Prof. Krishnamurthy, the founder of Buddhi Institute, for the panel discussion. Right. I think we've got a few questions. Okay, right. So all this, the first question is that all these strategies are meant for vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease dementia. Are there any preventive or modifiable interventions for frontal lobe dementia?
So that is, that's a good question, really. I think both FTD as well as DLB, as far as specific intervention risk factors are concerned, really, other than genetic factors, we do not understand very well. We know that certainly as far as DLB is concerned, of course, there is overlap with other pathologies in patients with DLB, or Alzheimer's pathology, and certainly vascular pathology in many of these patients as well. There is beginning to be some understanding of risk factors for Lewy body disease generally. For Parkinson's disease, there may be some toxins and all, but at this stage, there is nothing specific really for that. And similarly for FTD, we know that genetic factors are very important, but we know that the modifiable risk factors we identify for dementia in general also work in patients with FTD. There have been studies that have looked at risk factors. There was one study, in fact, from Australia. There was a large UK study looking at risk factors for FTD, and they did identify modifiable risk factors. So what they essentially do is, again, bring forward often the development of the disease, but there is a strong genetic sort of component to it, and that is, I think at this stage, we are essentially, as far as these interventions concerned, we just said, look, this is all-cause dementia. We're trying to see all that is modifiable that we currently understand. Yeah.
Okay, right. I hope that answers your question. Okay, the other question is that how
can I just maybe, sorry, excuse me, sorry. Can I just say that, look, as far as the other dementias are concerned, I mean, there is certainly a lot of work happening specifically. For example, with Alzheimer's disease, with ADAD, autosomal dominant Alzheimer's disease, there are studies happening. And usually those are pharmacological studies. And similarly for FTD, one could say, okay, you have families with clear genetic predisposition, so you can identify people at risk, and you could try to intervene early in those cases. So those could be very targeted cases. Here, you're not looking at general population, really. You're looking at very targeted population, say someone who has the genetic risk And then you can develop interventions which are specific to that disease. And that's happening. ADHD, it is possible, although currently the initial data has not been very positive, really. Looking at monoclonal antibodies, for example, in the DIAN trials haven't been positive so far, but in the future that may change. Yeah. Similarly so ApoE4 homozygotes. That's another population which almost behaves like autosomal dominant. People, the studies, we are awaiting the trial of that study that will come very soon, I think.
Right. Okay. Okay, the other question is, how do you control practice effects, family involvement, and online therapy while evaluating the efficacy input?
Yeah, okay. So I think that's a good question. And I partly actually mentioned that in my talk as well, that the practice effect is a fact of life when you do neuropsychological testing repeatedly. It happens in online testing, it happens in in-person testing, it happens all the time, really. We show that, and many of our studies we've shown, in stroke study, other studies, people get better. And you say, oh, why should they be getting better? They just get better because they're getting better at test performance. And even if they are not remembering the test, they know how to perform a test better. And so here, first thing we do with online testing, actually, our bigger concern was how valid is online testing, because people are not being supervised. Ideally, people should be supervised when they're doing testing, and be great if you can bring them in, even if they're doing computerized testing. If you can bring them into a lab and have supervised assessment, that's better than they're doing at home when the dog may be barking on the side, they have a cup of tea, and then someone drops in, there's a bell ring. So all those distractions affect performance, which you're not recording often and you're not aware of. Yeah. So we did a validation study initially. We did online testing relative to paper and pencil tests, and we thought that performance was quite, the correspondence was quite high. That study was published before we could say, okay, we had confidence in our online testing. That was one. And secondly, we, as I said, we did 2 baseline assessments. We did one, and then at least 24 hours after that, we did the second one. And we took the second as the baseline rather than the first one. So that already, if there was improvement that was happening, that had happened, and we discarded that, really. So that the second was the baseline rather than the first one. Otherwise, you would show much greater improvement over the first year. And then, of course, you have a control group that is also doing the same thing. So you see, both will have a practice effect. And in fact, you will probably, if you subtract the two, you will subtract the practice effect out of it as well, hopefully. So nothing is perfect, but I think that's probably the best one can do.
So the study only involves the patient, the caregiver is not at all involved, correct? Okay, so in that case, how do you gather adherence to the program? Do you do it only when patient is in the good mood, for example?
So I think firstly, I should say that these are healthy individuals that we are. These are people with risk factor. Not these are older people, but they are between 55 and 77 years. They are independent. They are engaged in trials. They're the independent people, so they don't have a caregiver. Yeah. So one can say, okay, is there a partner to this study? Do we need a partner to this study? And partners are helpful to actually look at function. But to get a partner in every case, what we found in studies, even studies that we do, in-person studies, it is often difficult to get a partner for many people. And it greatly increases our cost of the study, because partners are much harder to track down, to get them to fill questionnaires and all. So certainly, if you were looking at people with early dementia, you would need a partner. But I think with healthy people, you can get away without having a partner. in a study like this. And I don't think, I mean, and they don't have, many of them will not have a partner, and it really increases because you have to firstly consent them to do the study and again chase them to complete trials because they're less invested in the trial than the participant. So there are major challenges in having partners. But definitely, if you were doing a study in early dementia, even people with mild cognitive impairment, which of course we need, even for a diagnosis, we need a functional scale for them. And that has to ideally to be done by a partner rather than themselves.
Okay. So one question from me. How do you track the physical activity? Are the participants given, I know they have to keep the logbook, right? So do you trust your word for it? Or do you have a tracking devices to track the exercise?
No, we were not using tracking devices in this study. Yeah. But it would be a good idea to actually validate some of that reporting, really. I think that's a good idea because people may over-report what they're doing. So that, of course, would have added an expense. Ideally, yes. And I think if we're rolling out general population, if they're already using some devices, they have Apple Watches or something like that, one could possibly get, and that can be incorporated into a trial like this, that you could possibly use the data. And also, I think one could possibly monitor sleep as well, because another thing that one could possibly like to intervene is sleep. And if there were devices, one could be looking at sleep additionally.
So why only 4 risk factors that you have chosen? Because there's a lot more risk factors, such as smoking, for example, and the cardiovascular risk factors. Why are these not included? Because if you look at the contestant, more than 30 to 40% have actually a cardiovascular risk factors. I'm not sure about the prevalence of smoking in Australia anyway, but definitely in Malaysia, it's pretty high.
Yeah, smoking, fortunately, is not very high in this population. Yeah, in Australia, smoking rates have gone down. In fact, they are creeping up a bit now, but that's more in younger population rather than older population. In fact, that's one thing Australia has done quite well, control smoking. But I think it was a question of how much one can achieve in one trial. Already, I think because as you can see, most of the trials have been single domain trials, and other multi-domain trials have 2 domains, 3 domains, or 4 domains, really. Soon as you start increasing it, really, you get into more and more difficulties in terms of your randomization, in terms of controlling other variables. So I think it's a compromise one has to make. In real life, I think that's probably one, if you were intervening, you would probably incorporate that. And because you don't have to be very pure in your delivery. Here, of course, because we had to have a well-charted program for this trial over the year and then follow up. So everything had to be decided initially and actually put on the website of clinicaltrials.gov website. So one can't have too complex a design. It becomes too complex, it becomes unmanageable.
Yeah. Okay. But I think that's fair enough. What about the role of the non-modifiable risk factors, especially genetics, right? That has not been included in the study, but would that play a significant role?
Yeah, I think one of the things perhaps I should point out, when we actually looked at people who volunteered and those who didn't volunteer, we found that ones who volunteered had higher education, and also they had more likely to have family history of dementia. So maybe they had a genetic risk. And we have actually now data on GWAS data, the Genome Wide Association study. We had done a genotyping recently. that wasn't included because we didn't have the data then when we published the trial. We just received that data. So we will be looking at the genetic risk, especially ApoE. But generally, I think the message is that people with higher genetic risks, if you're ApoE positive, heterozygous, which is a lot of the population, maybe 20% of the population, 24%, at least Caucasian population, is probably less in some of the Asian populations. And a very small proportion of E4, which is the highest risk. Even they benefit. And sometimes it's possible that they benefit more from some interventions than people who have lower potential. So having a genetic risk doesn't mean that you will not benefit from modifiable risk factors. In fact, I think the general principle in prevention in medicine is that if you have one risk, high risk, say if you have a family history of heart disease, then you try to control your risk factors more, really. So you keep your cholesterol lower and your blood sugar well in control. You don't smoke if you have a strong family history. So I think that would be the principle one would probably follow in for dementia as well.
Okay, I think one last question, which I will try to put in together. Okay, one of the limitations that is noted is that is the inability of the subjects actually to sustain the intervention, right? So how to overcome this if the program is to be extended to the wider population, right? And in future, what would you have done?
No, very good question. Very good question. I think that's really a problem with online interventions generally, and all interventions. I think we are humans, and we fail very often, and we don't persist with good habits often. Yeah, but I think I think personalization is one, and having probably someone there at the other end, I think they can relate with, even if in the future that's an AI avatar or whatever we have. I think like if you go regularly to your GP, you're more likely to sustain something rather than if you do it totally on your own through the web. So that kind of, I think, personalization, and then sending information regularly, keeping contact, newsletters, personalized emails, or you're not haven't done this, we haven't heard from you. Look, this maybe rewards sometimes of some kind built in. If you done this, so you get this reward, points, things. So various kind of systems could be built in to improve motivation, really. And then I think building communities is the other thing, because we support each other. And if you work better, and exercise, for example, you're more likely to exercise if you do it with somebody. And if you do it in a community, you may have the social benefit as well as the exercise benefit, etc. So there are so many strategies that can be used to enable that.
Okay, so I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today.
Can I ask one last question?
Okay, of course.
Yeah. So you chose allowed people to choose 2, 3, or 4 interventions, and you randomized them. It brought 2 questions to my mind. One question I had was, your adherence is so much dependent on how you take to an intervention. And people will adhere to things that they do quite easily and naturally, as opposed to things that they find difficult to do. So, for example, I would be very good with aerobic exercise, but very bad with diet. So, and I think most of us are like this. So, if you did not, what shall I say, randomize, and you allowed people to choose the one that they would that they were happy, or the ones that they were happy doing, would that improve at compliance to the trial? Would that improve completion, long-term tracking, those issues? That's one. A subsidiary question, is there any rank order in which these factors are important in terms of prevention? In other words, is exercise more important than diet? I mean, do you have any data at all?
Yeah, okay, no, both good questions. The first thing is, actually, what we did actually was we looked at the risk profile. And did they have risk in 2 domains, 3 domains, 4, and wherever we thought that they had a risk, so they had profile wasn't optimal, we gave them that module. So it wasn't that they chose which one they wanted to do, really. Yeah. So it wasn't randomized in that sense. It's just that we didn't randomize them modules, try to see which module, one module versus another. We couldn't do that. We could analyze, do subsequent secondary analysis to try to figure that out, really, in terms of adherence and see what that. We did show that people who were younger did better. We showed that women did better, and also people who had high adherence, more than 60% adherence did better. So definitely those secondary analyses we have done, and we did show that. Really. Now, which one is more important? You ask me, I think physical exercise, I think, is probably the one that I pick as the most important, because not only because it has definite benefit for the brain, but also for the body in general. Physical exercise has so many benefits for heart health, for bone health, muscular health, everything. And they're, of course, combining strength training with aerobic exercise, not just going with aerobic. I think that is one thing that we should put most emphasis. I think diet, perhaps optimizing diet, if you're not eating a good diet, that's probably number 2. And then cognitive stimulation, I think, is the other thing, the third thing that I would focus on. Right?
Thank you.
Okay.
But
Okay,
of
so
course, if
Chris,
you have
I think
depression, if you have depression, then you treat that. That is very important, of course. If there is depression, then that of course needs treatment. Yeah.
okay. That includes anxiety as well.
Yeah, anxiety and depression. If you can lower anxiety as well, and stress generally. So depression and stress and anxiety is what we were targeting. Yeah.
And of course,
Okay,
things to
right.
improve vision and to optimize hearing.
Yeah, because all those
Of course.
things, of course, we should
Yep.
be looking
Yep.
into in the future. Yes.
Right. Okay, so I think we really have to stop now because we are above time, right? So once again, thank you to both Professor Sakti for your remarkable talk today, and also Prof. Krish and also for answering questions. I missed that out. And for Prof. Krish for the well-organized, smooth organization of today's webinar. I suppose that if the participants have other questions to ask you, can they sort of email you directly? Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. So before we end today's session, I would again like to remind the participants that the 19th ASAT conference will be held in Seoul from 8th to the 10th of May. 59 days, like 58 days today. So please check the ASAT website and register, as it will be, I think, another fantastic meeting. Okay, so last but not least, thank you to all of the participants for asking interesting questions. Would you agree, Prof. Sakti?
Yes, wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, really. Thank you again.
Thank you, Parmeet.
Okay.
Thank you, Krish and Suresh.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone. Thank you so much.